who lost their husbands. In 1890, it was only taken in certain states, or it only survives in certain states. Here we have Tabitha Watson, and she's listed as the widow of Bob King. So it's really nice to have because this is direct evidence, definitive, that says that this Tabitha, who is now Watson, was previously married to Robert King. That's a really nice find. Now we have the obituary of Tabitha Watson, and again, it ties into everything we've learned so far. She was married to Robert. They had 2 children. He passed away in 1876. And in 1879, she married Samuel Watson. And he died before she did. So let's recap. And this is kind of an important thing to do. Some people do a timeline. I tend to just list things out like this in a summary format. So Robert King and Tabitha House were married, and these dates and places are important, and I'll show you why in a minute. They were married July 28, 1870 in Howell County, Missouri. They had 2 children. He died in 1876. He's buried in Oregon County, Missouri, and she remarried to Samuel Watson in Oregon County, Missouri. There was a lot of moving back and forth between Howell and Oregon County, Missouri. I believe that they lived kind of on the border. I don't think the border changed. I think that they just kind of lived on the border. Now, let's look at what we don't know. So none of those records tell us who his parents were, and none of those records tell me when he was born or where he was born. So he doesn't appear in any census reports with Tabitha. So again, we can't find out when he was born or where he was born. I don't have any of the death certificates for his children, and I haven't found his obituary. I've looked high and low. So again, his obituary would probably tell me maybe who his parents were, when he was born, where he was born, and the same thing, the death certificates for his children. Usually they tell you where their parents were born. So those are some of the things that we're missing. But I'm going to go ahead and form a hypothesis. I've done, in all my record search, I found this guy called Wiltsey P. King and his wife Eliza Wilson, and they had a son named Robert King. And I believe that, there may be a correlation between their Robert King and my Robert King. And their Robert King was born 1848 in Illinois. So let's take a look at Wiley King, or Wiltsey King. Wiltsey King. His name does change quite often. So he was born in 1820 in Morgan County, Alabama. He was married to Eliza P. Wilson. She was born in Tennessee. They had 7 children. And as you can see in red, there's a Robert King born in 1848 in Illinois. Now one thing to notice is the first 4 children were born in Alabama, and then Mary and Robert were born in Illinois, and then Matilda was born in Tennessee, and then they ended up in Missouri. So when I first saw this, I kind of thought, I kind of don't believe that, because that's a lot of bouncing around for a family. But I kind of kept it in the back of my mind. We'll come back to that. So this is the 1850 McNairy County, Tennessee census report. Remember that one child was born in Tennessee. We have W.P. King and his wife Eliza and their 7 children, including a 3-year-old Robert King, born in Illinois about 1847. 1860, they're in Howell County, Missouri. And again, Wiltsey P. King with his wife Eliza, and they have a 12-year-old son named Robert. And also notice above Robert there's a William J. King. He's going to show up again. And in 1870, they're in Oregon County, Missouri. Robert is 22 years old. He's still living with his parents. His brother William has moved out, but he's living next door to them. And one thing to note is this census was taken in Oregon County, Missouri on July 10th, 1870. So on July 10th, Robert is living at home. 1880 census, again, Oregon County, Missouri. We have Wiltsey and his wife Eliza. We have his son William living next door still, and there's no Robert King. Why is there no Robert King? He's dead. He's supposed, yeah, he probably is dead. My Robert King is dead. So now we have another fine obituary of Wiltsey P. King. It gives us all the information we were looking for. However, it says he had 4 sons and 3 daughters, but none of them are named. Now, remember the whole Alabama, Illinois, Tennessee. So his obituary just happens to say that he was born in Alabama, he married his wife, and they moved to Greene County, Illinois, where they resided for 4 years. And then they went from Illinois to Tennessee, where they resided for a short time. And then from Tennessee, they went to Howell County, Missouri. And they kind of bounced back into Oregon County, Missouri. So what about Tabitha House? In 1860, she's in Oregon County, living with her parents, Hollingsworth House, and Eliza. She's 5 years old. Now, that's in Oregon County, Missouri. 1870, she's in Howell County, Missouri. Oh, I should say her parents are in Howell County, Missouri, because there's no Tabitha living in the house anymore. And this is taken August 9th, 1870. So the census for Oregon County was taken July 10th, 1870, and this one was taken August 9th. So bordering counties right next to each other, but a month difference between the census being taken. So she wasn't living at home, so she's probably married by now, probably living with her husband. So I kind of touched on this already. Oregon and Howell County are right next to each other. The 1870 census report for Oregon County was taken July 10th. The one for Howell County was taken August 9th. Wiltsey King first lived in Howell County, then he moved to Oregon County. And the House family first lived in Oregon County, then moved to Howell County, and then moved back to Oregon County. I'm going to go back to this slide. So, if you think about it, because the Oregon County census was taken in July and the Howell County census wasn't taken until August, and Robert and Tabitha were married July 28th, 1870, the census fits in with the timeline of them being married, okay? So it seems likely that Tabitha was not enumerated with her family on August 9th, 1870, because she had already married Robert on July 28th and already moved in with him. And by that, everything ties together. So you have Robert fitting in to where he should be fitting into, Tabitha fitting into where she should be fitting into, and the two of them being in the right place at the right time. Does anybody have any questions about that?
Could you go over this again?
So my conclusion is that the Robert King, son of Wiltsey, is the same Robert King who married Tabitha House. But there's no direct evidence that says that. Okay, so what's our next step? That's why you're all here. So we're going to look at the benefits of a DNA test. Now for this one, we're going to look at the autosomal test. And let's see. Okay. What time? How much time do I have?
You have plenty of time.
Okay. Okay. Great. Okay. So we're going to look at our DNA test. And when we look at our DNA test, we're gonna do a bunch of things. We're gonna find some matches, and then I'm gonna tell you what you do when you find them, and then we're gonna talk about what some of the limitations are, and basically look at how you can use DNA to break down your brick walls as well. So remember I told you that having a research question is very important, and being able to focus your search is really, really important. A lot of people come up to me and they say, I took 3 DNA tests, I got all my results, and now I don't know what to do. Okay, well, what's your goal? So if you tell me what your goal is, then I can tell you what you can do with your test. Or if you are getting ready to take a test, then we can decide what kind of test to take based on your goal. So the King line was carried down through my maternal grandfather, okay? And then it came through my mother, and then it came to myself. So I can't test my father because he's not a descendant of the King family, and I can't test my mother's father because he is not an actual King surname. He's not from a king to a king to a king. So, and then I also can't test my mother for mitochondrial DNA because we're talking about her father, not her mother. So the only option I have left is that third test, the autosomal test, the one that you can test yourself. You can test males or females. I'm fortunate that I have 3 grandparents living, both parents living, so I was able to do the test on my mother, myself, and her father to look at this King line. So you do get a lot of matches, but there are 2 tools you can use to work through those matches. The first thing I did, because I'm looking for the King family, is I did a search through all my matches for the King surname. So if you were using Ancestry, you would look for the King name through all the trees. It's the same kind of thing. You look through the King name for all of your matches. So when I did that, and I was looking at my grandfather, he had 70 matches with the King surname. So that was a little overwhelming to me at first. By the way, if you're from the South, King is a very popular name. It's kind of like Smith. But this is what it looked like. So this is family tree DNA. And up here, I put in my search term, which was the King. On the left-hand side, that red circle is around a 7. That means that there's 7 pages worth of matches. And there's 10 people per page, so it's 70 matches. And on the right side here is a list of people's surnames, and you can see the King pops up. If there's a surname in common, it's in bold, and if it's one that satisfies your search, it's blue and in bold. So these 2 matches here, I highlighted, and this is my mother, and this is me, right? Because my mother is the daughter, and I'm the granddaughter. And then 3rd to 5th cousin, and 3rd to 5th cousin. So this is what it would look like if you took a family tree DNA autosomal test. So I found Marjorie. Now, how did I find Marjorie? I actually received an email from her, and she said that I think that we are connected via the King line, the Thomas line, the Lashley line, and they were from Missouri. And I said, great. I said, all of these surnames are connected to me except for Lashley. I never heard of Lashley. So we decided that King and Thomas were the 2 lines that were directly connected to us. We compared our trees and we found the connection. And it turns out that she descends from that William J. King. Remember, he's the brother of Robert. He lived next door to Wilsey. So not only is he the brother of Robert, but he's also the son of Wilsey. And by this point, I was still I kind of put Wilsey on the back burner. I wasn't really thinking about him anymore. And this kind of brought him back up to the forefront. And I thought, oh, okay, well, let's see what we can find here. So what did I do when I did find her? I immediately asked for information about her William J. King. I had some information in my family tree already, but she's a direct descendant of him. So better to have more information than her. So I emailed her and I emailed her and I said, send me stuff, and I'll send you stuff of my stuff, you know, my Robert. And I took what she sent me and I put it into my family tree, and I did a little relationship report, which you can do in most programs. And then I compared it to the relationship that family tree DNA predicted. You remember this down here, 3rd to 5th cousin? Oh, well, that must have been someone else. Marjorie's the 2nd to 4th cousin. I thought that sounded kind of off, but so they predicted Marjorie as the 2nd to 4th cousin. This is my relationship report, okay? So this is Wilsie at the top, and this is Robert King down to my grandfather, and that's William King down to Marjorie. And according to my relationship report, my grandfather and Marjorie are 3rd cousins. So that fits in perfectly with family tree DNA's prediction. Now, this is all a lot of fun, and remember, you're doing this for, let's say, 20 surnames at a time. You're getting emails, you're sending emails. Now, what are some of the limitations? So Marjorie was a very difficult person to get a hold of. So I would email her, ask her for information. I wouldn't hear from her for months. And then I found out who her sister was, so I emailed her sister, and I said, can you tell Marjorie to email me back? And then I'd get a response, and then I wouldn't hear from her for months. So you got to have thick skin. There's going to be some frustrations there. And the other thing is, she actually doesn't have an online tree. I mean, who doesn't have an online tree? And she did not have she doesn't have a tree uploaded to her family tree DNA profile either. Which is good. So I have a clicker. I mean, I have a laser pointer, but it doesn't work on the TVs. This little icon here means, if it's green, it means that they have a family tree that you can look at. And this is how to email them. This is to make a note. And that tells you the people that match both you and that person. So, yeah, so it can be a little frustrating. But now I have a known cousin, so we've confirmed that we connect on the King line. We're both very happy. And now I want to go in and look at how exactly my grandfather and Marjorie match to each other. So with family tree DNA, you are able to look at your actual chromosome data. And I did that, and I organized it into a nice little spreadsheet. And there was one little thing that was kind of niggling me in the back of the mind, which is that Thomas name, because we also connect via the Thomas line. Well, I already have people that I match to on the Thomas line, and I already have their chromosome data in my spreadsheet too. So I kind of wanted to go and check and see if there was any overlap there. So this is what my small spreadsheet looks like, okay? And I'm sorry I couldn't blow it up more, because if I did, I would lose some of the resolution. I'll just go through this quickly. So this is Marjorie at the top. This is Larry and Billy. These are 2 brothers. These are the people that we match to on the Thomas line. And then again, Marjorie, we match to both the Thomas and the King line. And we match to Larry and Billy on chromosome 13, and we match to Marjorie on chromosome 13. And the parts of the chromosome that we match to are exactly the same. So, in fact, our match to Marjorie is probably not the King family, it's actually the Thomas family. So that's how I was able to determine that. And this, again, is one of those DNA advanced class things. You know, I just wanted to show you, just give you an idea of what things kind of look like. And that was pretty much it for the case study. Did anybody have any questions about that?
Well, I was just, a couple of things I was wondering. First off, how in the world do you cite that and annotate that as a source?
Ginger R. Smith.
I mean, there's a lot, I mean, seriously, if you wanted to prove it, you've got a lot of detail on it. The other thing is, were you able to go back to historical records and find that Thomas line? Were you able to trace the actual person?
Yes.
Knowing that you had a trail to go down.
Yes. And the funny thing about it is that the Thomas line actually goes back further than the King line. So remember I told you the autosomal usually only goes back about 5 generations? Well, our Thomas connection goes back even further than that. So even though the testing company only guarantees that you can find matches up to 5 generations back, you can actually usually go back a little bit further than that. It's just not, they just don't, say that they can do that for sure.
Do you find it sometimes very difficult with some folks? For example, if you have Irish blood, for example, and you have African blood, how do you go about that? Because yours seem to be very simple in that. I don't mean anything.
No, I understand.
In that the people who you have are close here, but what about crossing continents?
That's a very good question. So originally, these tests were only offered in the United States. So there was a very difficult to get populations from Europe, for example, to test. And other populations like Native Americans, real Native Americans from the United States pretty much absolutely refused to get tested. So it's Native American ancestry